What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Twisted 20s podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to reminding you of your God-given purpose through personal testimonies, trials, and personal revelations. I believe that God has created each and every single one of us with a purpose for a purpose, but it is up to us to align with it. I'm your host, Louise, and I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Twisted 20s podcast. It's your girl, Louise, and I'm so excited for today's episode. And yes, I say that every episode because I truly enjoy what God has called me to do. And I believe that when God calls us and chooses us to do something, that we are to do it with joy, excitement, obedience. And so today I am talking about something that I personally struggle with, okay? And recently in our ministry, and I don't understand like what God is doing with this theme that he needs me to do with the podcast. These past few episodes have been consistently based around obedience, and just really purging us from things that are truly preventing us from being obedient and doing the things that God has called for us to do. As I say in every intro, you guys, I truly believe that God has called and created each and every single one of us with a purpose, for a purpose, meaning that God created us with a purpose in mind. And when we allow certain things, whether it's depression, disobedience, pride, arrogance, whatever it may be, when we allow these things to get in the way of God's plan, God's vision, God's desire for our life, we cannot fully walk out the purpose that he originally created us for. And so today I wanted to talk about the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, this is a story that I recently learned about. We read Daniel in our ministry during Bible study. And I had heard about King Nebuchadnezzar before, but not to this certain extent. I also have read parts of Daniel, but I never really knew about this story. So, this story will be coming from Daniel chapter 1-4. You guys can read that. I suggest, if I'm being honest, reading it from it's the contemporary English version. Now, this version is probably one of the easiest. It's the best version of the Bible that I have been reading so far. It really helps me to better understand the Bible. And so today's podcast episode is going to be centered around Daniel chapter 1-4. If you guys don't have a physical Bible, I recommend reading the English, the contemporary English version on the YouVersion Bible app as well. So just to kind of give you guys a little backstory, this story is about King Nebuchadnezzar, but it's also about Daniel and his friends. So Daniel, of course, was Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they were in this position of being in the royal palace anyway, because King Nebuchadnezzar had captured, or he had attacked, Jerusalem. And he ordered his palace official to bring them boys of royal lineage. And he wanted them to be given the best wine, the best meat, the best foods, and all these things. And Daniel and them was like, listen, we don't need all that. Let me just get the vegetables and fruit, okay? I don't need all that. And because of that, they were in a position of, one, I believe it was a representation in a way of them being clean. And because they were in that position, Daniel was able to hear from God. And he was willing to hear from God. And he was not willing to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's God or statues. So what happened was Nebuchadnezzar, he had a dream. And, well, a nightmare is what he considered it. He was having horrible nightmares that he couldn't sleep. And so he went and he called his counselors, his advisors, magicians, and wise men. And he said, hey, I'm troubled by this dream and I don't understand it. And I want you to explain it to me. Now, the crazy part about it is he didn't tell them what the dream was. And he expected them to tell him what the dream was and explain the dream. So, of course, someone was like, well, why don't you just tell us and then we'll explain. So he was like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing it. So, eventually, nobody was able to tell him the dream. And so he was like, you know what? Just forget it. All y'all dying. I want them all dead. I put them all to death, including the ones that was to be dead were going to be Daniel and his 3 friends. So Daniel was like, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. He go to the palace official and was like, listen, why the king give such cruel orders? Like, let me talk to my God, the true living God. If you would just give me some time, I can explain the dream. So Daniel, he went back home. He told his friends, he told the homeboys, he was like, hey, we need to pray. We need to pray that God, the true God who rules the heavens, that he will be merciful and explain the mystery of this dream to us. So God did. He answered Daniel, and Daniel interpreted the dream. Now, I think the dream more so was, the dream itself was a warning to King Nebuchadnezzar. And King Nebuchadnezzar did what he promised. He promised whoever could tell him the dream and explain it that he would promote them, he would reward them. And he did. He held his promise. He promoted Daniel. But the issue that came to play was King Nebuchadnezzar, he got prideful after this dream. And I believe Nebuchadnezzar already dealt with pride, but this dream was like the tip of the iceberg. After that, he built a gold statue. He was forcing everybody to bow down to it. And I know you guys have probably heard the story about them in the fire. And something that we recently learned in our ministry is that Daniel was not in that fire. I always thought that it was Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in there, but it was only Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Daniel was not in there because if you read the scripture, King Nebuchadnezzar had changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, which was named after his god. Okay? I want y'all to keep that in mind because I'm going to say something later on that coincides with that. So when they said, hey, we not bowing down to your statue, he was like, throw them in the fire. Throw them in the fire. Okay? Once again, are you willing? I said this a few episodes ago when I was talking about being able to choose God in your very last breath. Even when they were about to be, quote unquote, put to death, they were about to be thrown into fire. The fire was so hot that it killed the guards who were opening the door. They still chose Jesus Christ. They still chose the God of heaven, the true God. While they were in the fire, King Nebuchadnezzar was like, now, wait a minute now. I thought we put 3 people in there. It's a 4th man walking around in the fire. God showed himself. He revealed himself as the true living God. Nebuchadnezzar got a second dream. Okay. He took him out of the fire. He was like, hey, y'all worship the true God of heaven, all that different stuff. He had another dream. Daniel interpreted. And Daniel told him, hey, I think it was that dream. I think that was a dream where he had a second dream. And I'm sorry, y'all. I got a lot of notes for this episode, and I just want to make sure that I'm hitting on every single thing. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm explaining everything correctly to y'all because I really do not want you guys to miss out on anything. He had a second dream. And I'm actually going to read this one from the Bible. It's the second dream is in chapter 4. And I'm going to read the interpretation. the interpretation of it. So basically, Daniel, the dream that he had was a warning from God, just like the first dream. And the second, I'm going to read this. Let me go. It's coming from chapter 4, and I'm going to read 10. I'm going to read 10 through 17. In my sleep, I saw a very tall tree in the center of the world. It grew stronger and higher until it reached to heaven and could be seen from anywhere on earth. It was covered with leaves and heavy with fruit, enough for all nations. Wild animals enjoyed its shade, birds nested in its branches, and all creatures on earth lived on its fruit. While I was in bed having this vision, a holy angel came down from heaven and shouted, "Chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Make the animals leave its shade and send the birds flying from its branches. Leave its stump and roots in the ground, surrounded by grass and held by chains of iron and bronze. Make sure that this ruler lives like the animals, out in the open fields, unprotected from the dew. Give him the mind of a wild animal for 7 long years. This punishment is given at the command of the holy angels. It will show to all who live that God Most High controls all kingdoms and chooses for their rulers persons of humble birth." Okay. So Daniel goes on to basically explain the dream to him, and it's a long explanation, so I'm not going to read all of that. But I did want to read that dream to you so that you can hear what God was instructing was going to happen. And I just want to remind you, just from King Nebuchadnezzar's story, is that we should always be in a place of humbleness. James 4:6 says that, but he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So even though King Nebuchadnezzar was in a place of pridefulness, God still showed him grace. Because if you go on to read the chapters, his son didn't get as much grace. I'm just saying. But when we allow pride to get in the way, we are truly leaning into our own understanding. It literally causes us to be in a position to be humbled. It literally puts us in a place to be humbled. Isaiah 2:11 says that the eyes of the arrogant will be humbled and human pride brought low. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. The Lord literally told King Nebuchadnezzar, you will have the mind of an animal. For 7 long years. This man was in the wild for 7 years, living like an animal. 7 years. He had his nails. I think his nails had grew like not hooves. It's not hooves, but his nails had grew in some sort of form of like animal claws. This man was basically an animal for 7 years because of his pride. The Lord stripped him of everything he had. I know people love to say the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, but that is so true. The thing is, though, King Nebuchadnezzar, even though his humility came after he suffered, God still showed him grace. And I think the most important takeaway from the story of King Nebuchadnezzar is, how can we be better? And I like to ask myself this question after reading a lot of stories from the Bible, because oftentimes I feel like the Bible is a clear representation of who we are and things that we struggle with. And instead of judging, we should be able to truly see ourselves. And maybe you don't deal with pride as heavy as King Nebuchadnezzar did. Maybe you're not building statues of yourself. Maybe you're not putting yourself high above others. But we've all dealt with pride to some extent. Because all pride is a self-centered attitude that leads us to ignore God, elevate ourselves, and rely on our own strength, wisdom, and success. We have all done that. I know I have. And when I've found myself in that place, I've noticed that I either have to start all the way over or the things really just don't work out. I mean, just really just don't work out. The Lord shuts it down real quick. Real quick. You guys know that I like to be honest. I like to be vulnerable, and I really like to be transparent with you guys. And if I'm doing that, pride is something that I deal with. It's something that I battle with, especially, wanting to be a content creator and wanting to be this amazing podcast host. Sometimes it's easy for me to rely on my own strength or even rely on my own ideas. And sometimes it's easy for me to be self-centered and ignore God. And it's easy. It is. And it's not to say that God doesn't care about my ideas or God doesn't want me to be a content creator or a podcast host. But it just simply means, in simple terms, that am I allowing God to be the center of everything? And if I'm being honest, I haven't been doing that. And I think that's why God hasn't taken a lot of the things in my life and elevated them the way that He desires. Because He already knows that deep down, I deal with pride myself. So take it from me and take it from King Nebuchadnezzar that those who walk in pride, He is able to humble. I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to be humbled the way the King Nebuchadnezzar got humbled. I'm just saying, that man was going through it. But even in the midst of us being prideful, even in the midst of us being arrogant, God still shows us grace that we don't even deserve, that we truly don't deserve. It's not a price that we can pay for the grace that God shows us. I feel like this episode was a little all over the place, but I really hope that you guys understand the gist of it. Pride comes before the fall. King Nebuchadnezzar had several dreams, several warnings, and he ignored them. Even after getting warnings, he still exalted himself. After that first dream, he built a whole entire statue and wanted people to bow down to it. Instead of saying, hey, maybe this dream is a warning from God. Instead of looking inwardly, he exalted himself even more. Even after God revealed Himself, he still did it. So much to the point where he even decided to name Daniel Belteshazzar, which was the name of his god. It doesn't matter what the world calls you. You are who God says you are. So even when Daniel was being called by a false god, Daniel was who God called him to be. So I hope that today's episode has encouraged you. I hope that it has reminded you to not be prideful. Even in the small things that we don't even think that we're being prideful with. Don't be prideful. Because pride will always lead you to a place of having to be humbled. If you guys would like to share your testimony or join me on the Twisted 20s podcast as a co-host, you guys already know what to do. You can email me at support@twistedtwenties.org. Peace, love, and blessings. T. Louise.